Today we're going to discuss how to solve fractional equations. We have an example of a fractional equation in the do now. How would we define a fractional equation? Well, a fractional equation is an equation where the coefficients of the variable are fractions. For instance, if we take a look at this expression here, this fraction here, the coefficient of the u is 3/5. And the coefficient of this u at the end is 1/10. So this is an example of a fractional equation. And the question now is, how would we solve a fractional equation? Well, a lot of students like to combine the fractions on one side of the equation and solve, but there's an easier way using the least common denominator. If we find the least common denominator for 5, 6, and 10, which in this case would be, I believe, 30, we can clear the fractions right away by doing the following. All right, I'll rewrite this problem. By multiplying the right side by 30, which is over 1, and the left side by 30 over 1. Now, what happens here is because we picked the least common denominator, when we multiply this out, all denominators should clear. Let's see. On the right side, we would get u over 10 times 30 over 1. And here we see that 10 goes into 30 3 times, and we get 3u. So the 10 in the denominator has been cleared. On the left side, we would have to distribute the 30. And when we distribute the 30, notice that the denominators of 5 and 6 will clear. Let's try it. So we get 3u over 5 times 30 over 1 minus 5 over 6 times 30 over 1. And in this case, the 5 goes into the 36 times, and the 6 goes into the 35 times. So we end up with this linear equation, 18u, since 3u times 6 is 18u, minus 25 equals 3u. And we solve the resulting equation. Notice that here we multiply both sides by 30. This is the multiplication property of equality. And we can multiply both sides of an equation by any non-zero number. And here on this side, well, on one side, we had to use the distributive property of multiplication over addition or subtraction, depending on the operation. And this subtraction sign told us that we would have to distribute, whereas on the right side, we didn't have an addition or subtraction sign. So solving this resulting equation, we get 15u minus 25 equals 0. We could bring the 25 over, divide by 15, and our answer would be 5/3. And that would be our solution set for this fractional equation. So let's just write a summary on how to solve a fractional equation. To solve I'll write down to solve an equation with fractional coefficients, we find the least common denominator of all the denominators that appear in this equation. And there may be 3 denominators, there may be 4 denominators, there may be only 1 denominator. But we find the least common denominator of all the denominators, and then we multiply each side by the least common denominator. We may use the distributive property of multiplication over addition. But the fact that we multiply each side by the least common denominator is this property, the multiplication property of equality. Okay, at this point, all denominators should clear. And then finally, we solve the resulting equation. And the resulting equation should either be linear or perhaps quadratic. And that's how we solve an equation with fractional coefficients. All right, let's try one that's a little bit more complicated. Okay, now this time we have an inequality with fractional coefficients, but solving an inequality is the same as solving an equation, except when we multiply or divide both sides by a negative number, we reverse the inequality sign. So let's use the same technique. First, we look at the denominators and find the least common denominator, and the least common denominator of 8, 3, and 6 is 24. We could pick a larger multiple of 8, 3, and 6, which would be 48, but we want to find the least common multiple or the least common denominator, so our numbers are a little bit easier to work with. So what we'll do is we're going to take this and multiply each side by 24 over 1. Okay, so let's put this in here. And we're multiplying both sides by a positive number, so the inequality does not change direction. All right. Now, because there's subtraction on each side of this inequality, we have to distribute on each side. So let's see if we could do this all in one step. When we multiply the 24 by x over 8, 8 goes into 24 3 times. The 8 divides through, so we could simply write 3x. Minus, let's carry that down. The 3 goes into the 24 8 times, so I'll put the 8 here, and I'll bring down that numerator, x minus 2. Is greater than or equal to, the 6 goes into 24 4 times, so we'll put the 4 here, times x plus 1, and we must also multiply this 1 by 24. This does not divide through, we just simply write minus 24, since 1 times 24 is 24. Okay, and then we proceed to solve as we usually do. Let's quickly do that. Here we distribute a negative 8, and we get negative 8x plus 16. Here we get 4x plus 4 minus 24. Combine like terms, negative 5x plus 16 is greater than or equal to, and on the other side we get 4x minus 20. Then we have to bring the variable on one side and the numbers on the other, and it doesn't matter which way we approach it. Okay, let's bring this 4 here, and we get negative 9x plus 16 is greater than or equal to negative 20. Then we subtract the 16, and we get negative 9x is greater than or equal to negative 36. Now we have to divide by a negative 9. And when we divide or multiply both sides of an inequality by a negative number, the inequality switches direction. So we get x is less than or equal to 4, and that would be our solution set. All right, let's take a look at one that comes out to be a quadratic. I'd like you to try this yourselves. Find the least common denominator of the denominators and see what you end up with. Okay, the least common denominator of 2 and 15, 2, 15, and 10 is 30. So if we multiply both sides by 30, and it's really 30 over 1. Oh, sorry. We put the 30 over 1 on the right here and write this in black. X squared over 2 and 2x over 15 plus 1 over 10. And we distribute. Okay, well, actually here we just multiply the 2. There's no distribution. But here we distribute because we've got addition in the parentheses. So here, the 2 goes into the 30 15 times. The 15 goes into the 30 2 times. So we get 2 times 2x. And the 10 goes into the 30 3 times. And 3 times 1 is 3. So we end up with this quadratic. 15x squared equals 4x plus 3. Now, to solve a quadratic, we have to write it in standard form. So we have to get one side to be 0. So we get 15x squared minus 4x minus 3 equals 0. Using the AC method, 15 times negative 3 is negative 45. Two factors of negative 45 that add up to negative 4 would be negative 9 and 5. So we could rewrite this as 15x squared minus 9x plus 5x minus 3. And in the first two, we could factor out a 3x, which would leave us with a 5x minus 3. And because we want a 5x minus 3 again, in factoring by grouping, this is a 1. So the factorization is 3x plus 1 times 5x minus 3. So 3x plus 1 times 5x minus 3 equals 0. Don't forget to set each factor to 0. Show this step. This is a very important step. So x is negative a third, or x equals 3/5. And I will leave the check up to you. This would be the solution set. Very good. Okay, let's try one more by yourselves. U squared over 15 minus u plus 2 over 6 equals negative 2/5. And please use the other problems as a model. So if we take a look at the denominators, 15, 6, and 5, it looks like the least common denominator would be 30 again. So let's multiply each side by 30. So we multiply this side by 30 over 1 and this side by 30 over 1. And let's put this in parentheses. Okay, now the side that needs distribution is the left side. So let's distribute very carefully here. And distribute the first distribution should be clearing the denominators, if there is one. Okay, do not use double distribution right away. So let's just divide the 15 into 30 and we get 2u squared. Bring down this subtraction sign, divide 6 into 30 and put the 5 there with the numerator in parentheses since it's a binomial. Do not distribute here yet. And the 5 goes into the 36 times, so we get negative 2 times 6. So now let's solve the resulting quadratic. Now we distribute one more time this negative 5. write this in standard form. And if we add 12, we get plus 2, I believe. And now we use that AC method again. 2 times 2 is 4. Two factors of positive 4 that add up to negative 5 are negative 4 and negative 1. And we factor by grouping. So we factor out a 2u from the first two and a minus u in the second, a minus 1 in the second two. So these factors match. And we get 2u minus 1 times u minus 2. So we have 2u minus 1 times u minus 2 equals 0. So 2u minus 1 equals 0, or u minus 2 equals 0. So u is a half, or u equals 2. And that's a solution set, and I'll leave the check up to you. Okay, so this concludes our lesson on equations with fractional coefficients. We will be getting to word problems that involve such equations very soon. Have a great day, everyone. Be safe and well.